So John, I literally, I mean, we're 6 hours apart. We're half a world between us.
Yes.
And yet here we are having a conversation about something that we both care very passionately about. So thank you so much for joining me on the program. It's really, what I wanted to say to you, what I really want to say to the listeners is, a conflict and a crisis like the one that you are very near to and what's going on in Ukraine is easy for us in America to sort of lose our momentum around the importance of our support. And so there's still a crisis going on, and we wanted to bring you on so that you could share your viewpoint from where you're sitting today about what it is that you're seeing going on. And then obviously we want you to talk about corporate aid for Ukraine and what that is and why you felt compelled to do what you've done. And then we're going to have a major call to action here at the end of this program. That's really kind of putting a bow on what it is that we want to try to do with corporate aid for Ukraine when it comes to the community of goodness warriors that Social Good Promotions believes that it's built. So I'm going to talk very little, John. I'm going to allow you the opportunity to really share with us your perspective on what's going on from your vantage point and talk to the people.
Sure. Well, thanks, Roger. It's really great to be here with you today and talk to your audience. As you can hear from my accent, I'm an American. I'm living in Krakow, Poland, actually a little bit east of Krakow, Poland, so a little closer to the Ukrainian border. If I walk to the top of the hill outside my window and I stretch my neck, I could just about make the mountains that are between us and Ukraine. So it's a 2-hour drive. It's very close, very personal for me. I follow world events. I follow crises and hurricanes in the Philippines and various tragedies all over the place. And this is the first time in my life that I was right on the doorstep of a calamity, of a humanitarian catastrophe, manifested in 3.5 million people fleeing their homes over the border within 4 weeks. And hundreds of thousands came here to Krakow. 3.5 million totally to Poland. And the amazing thing, and this was raised to me, I was at a conference a month ago with charitable organizations on the ground here in Poland and on Ukraine, because Poland's right on Ukraine's border, that back in 2014, when there was the Syrian refugee crisis, I think the Russians were causing some problems back then too, and it was headline news for 6 to 9 months. The refugees coming across Europe. It was headline news in the States too, but in Europe it was every day. And the person from the United Nations reminded us that was 1 million refugees stretched out over 6 to 9 months coming to 15 countries. And all the countries are putting their arms up and saying, no, we've got enough. We don't want any more. You take them. In this case, we have 3.5 million in 4 weeks coming to one country. And no government in the world would be ready for that, right?
No.
And so what happened was, and I said it recently, was in the midst of the worst of humanity and what's happening in Ukraine, we have the best of humanity here in Poland. I've never been more proud of my adopted home, where literally millions of Poles stepped up and took Ukrainians into their homes.
Yeah.
There was no government effort. The people just drove. I drove to the border, picked up a family of 5, took them to a friend's house. It happened thousands and thousands of times. People didn't get compensated yet for it. The middle class working folks have the Ukrainians in their homes. The president of Poland last week gave a speech in the Ukrainian parliament, and he says, we don't call them refugees. We call them our guests. I mean, there were amazing acts of humanity. I was almost crying every day watching things that were going on. Incredible. And it was during that same call that you were on with our friend Jonathan, where I just, after the call, I said, I got to do something here. Now, I'd done some little smaller things locally, but decided I needed to do something more serious. So as an American, I can communicate to my fellow Americans better than maybe even the media can, because I'm a credible source right here on the ground, living for a long time. Um, and I can see, I learned about an expression called donor fatigue or crisis fatigue. People get kind of bored of it. There's a new topic. And we're not talking about, a tornado that affects 100,000 people. We're talking about 44 million people's life being disrupted in Ukraine, of which 5 million have left the country. Another 5 million are out of their homes. My wife is an English teacher. She's Polish, English teacher in a local school. And just like everybody stepping up to help, the director of the school came and said, okay, we're going to get some Ukrainian kids, refugees who came with their parents across the border, sometimes walking 20, 30 miles, sometimes no food for a couple of days. Who would like to teach the Ukrainian kids English? My wife raised her hand and volunteered. And it started with 8 and then 12 and now 25 Ukrainian kids she's teaching English to. They're all so grateful. They're all so happy. She wrote me a text today and said, I got a new girl in the class today, 16-year-old high school kid who came from Donbass, that eastern area. She said since 2014, she's been living in the basement with her parents because they're afraid to come out since 2014, because the real invasion of Ukraine started in 2014.
Right.
So she said this girl is like shell shocked. She comes to the class. So, we're helping the kids at the school. We're helping refugee centers. The needs are so incredible that we're trying to keep this donor fatigue from coming into place, and just reminding people, even the people who donated, let's say 6 months ago to the Red Cross or whatever, that if you have the means, there's lots of great places where we can be helping people. So I sent you the article. I don't know if you had a chance to read the article, The 10 Million Volunteers. I wrote an article that got published kind of summarizing what happened in the beginning, and this massive humanity of literally millions of people stepping up to help their neighbors and brothers and sisters was one of the most inspiring things I witnessed. And I was trying to think about what my role can be in this, right? And so there's literally millions of people in Poland who have Ukrainians in their spare room, in their basement, in their extra house or whatever, and not getting paid a penny for it. They're just doing it to help, right? My company in the promotional industry, doing polo shirts and stuff like that, we just hired Power to Promo. We just hired 65 Ukrainian refugees to work in our factory. We probably didn't need all that many of them, but we just want to help. So we've got people folding T-shirts and doing pretty basic stuff. None of them have any experience in our field.
Sure.
But so today I was walking through the factory. So the first thing was like the micro level, just drive to the border, get some people, put them in a home. The second thing was, that we're partner company with Vantage Apparel in Avenel, New Jersey. So
yes, sir.
Vantage is Lincoln's partner. We're really close. So I called them, Ira Neiman, in the beginning, and said, hey, we'd like to help out a local refugee center. And he said, yeah, sure. How can we help? So they did a, match dollar for dollar with their employees. They raised a bunch of money from within the company, and the company donated. My company did the same. And we end up supporting, actually the story behind it, I'll tell you in a second, but we're supporting a local refugee center, which is housing 300 people. It's not tents. It's beautiful buildings that were just not yet ready for use. And so the township decided, let's turn it into a home for the folks coming over. And we paid for all the furniture, all the beds, because there was nothing in these buildings.
Sure.
Another company's donating something for the food. So this is just 300 people. And there's, millions who need the help. So we're doing that. so I thought, okay, so I got the micro thing. Like the two families I help personally from the border, I see them every week. I want to keep in touch. I want to see how they're doing, their little kids are doing. The fathers, of course, are walking around in the forest with AK-47s defending their country, and the moms and the kids are over here by themselves. So we got the micro thing, I got the middle thing, and I thought, okay, what can I do in a bigger way? And that's where I came up with the idea for corporate aid for Ukraine.
And donor fatigue is a real thing. We are acutely aware of this notion of, especially when something is as difficult to connect with on an emotional level as a war.
Yeah.
It's hard for us to try to stay engaged in a way that's meaningful for an extended period of time, because we already have enough bad news in the world going on to have one more thing that we've got to deal with. And yet the scale of this problem is so enormous that it is imperative that we fight through that as a an economy, as a group of potential supporters. And it's why we want you to be able to explain what's going on and why. So talk about corporate aid for Ukraine. Like what, once you came to the conclusion of, okay, I got to do something big here. I can't play a small game. What's the result of where you're at?
Sure. So I will start out by saying, I've made donations to charity in the past, but I'm basically an entrepreneur who's been focused on growing my business for the last 30 years.
Sure.
I've got my family. I've got plenty of things to go. I go to the States to see my family there. So I would have to say I wouldn't define myself as like a highly charitable person in terms of donating my time.
Okay.
So when this happened, and I saw physically with my eyes the hundreds of thousands of people coming who look just like, you couldn't tell a Polish person from a Ukrainian one on the street. They're just, the languages are kind of similar. The cultures are similar. There's 200,000 of them in Krakow now, a city of 800,000 people. So the population grew a lot. So you see that on a very personal basis. I joined Jonathan Isaacson from Gemini. I joined his online broadcast, talking to some of the people in Kyiv, talking to some academics who were really experts on the topic, and then talking to some of the people themselves who escaped. This woman, Elena, who you talked about earlier, who I've since become friends with. And I just never felt a calling like this before. I just thought, okay, John, you got to do something. Because what happened after that webinar or whatever online conference was an awful lot of people started calling and saying, how can we help? How can we donate? And the first people calling were some of the big guys or some of the big companies who wanted to give large amounts of money. And it all ran into the same kind of wall, which is that Americans are probably statistically the most generous people in the world in terms of the percentage that we donate to charities and support causes. But we like our tax deductibility.
Right.
So you could donate $100, $1,000, $5,000, $50,000, but you want to, taxes are too high. You want to get your tax deductibility. And we kept running into the same hurdle, which is that you actually, in the United States, you pretty much can't donate to an overseas cause directly.
Right. It's
just not tax deductible. And I started researching it. I went to Wharton Business School, so I studied finance. I'm not in finance anymore, but I have that financial background. I worked a little bit in fund private equity area. And I just was starting to think about that. Well, this isn't that hard. There's a cause that needs money, and there's people who have money. What can we do to bridge that gap? So I started researching it, and I found a Washington, D.C. organization called Charities Aid Foundation, which in 1992, it was virtually completely illegal to donate money overseas in the States. A lot of it ended up going to some African or Asian drug lord, and people weren't sure where the money was going. So the IRS was not very friendly towards overseas donations.
Right.
So the Charities Aid Foundation was founded as a kind of bridge the gap of getting the money into reputable places. And so they have a deal basically with the IRS that they will do a complete vetting of any recipient organization getting aid, and then it will qualify as tax deductible for an American citizen or an American company in this 501c3 tax deductible structure. It's a pretty onerous process to get it started, but after having a few calls, these guys are the gurus of this. They're the best in the United States at helping people create foundations or funds or charities to help overseas causes. So I used a lawyer over here, a friend, David DeBenedetti from New York. Actually, he's from Ohio, but he's a New York bar lawyer, Georgetown grad, wonderful guy. And we did it together. In about 2 weeks, we set up a fund, which we called Corporate Aid for Ukraine, with the Charities Aid Foundation. And voila, we have, people told us it was 3 to 6 months to do this, and we did it in about 2 weeks. We created a fund. We don't dig any ditches. We don't, do anything ourselves personally. We are the mechanism to have the money be donated, so the donor gets the tax deductibility. And because we live here, we know the projects and the charities that are legitimate, worthwhile, and truly need the help now. So we're the mechanism. And I personally, with David, have the disbursement rights. We say to the Charities Aid Foundation, we want $50,000 to go to food to be delivered to Kharkov. We want $25,000 to go to pacemakers and stents to be sent to the cardiological hospital in Kyiv. So there's no middleman. There's no fee taking. The money comes in and we get it directed straight to the causes that are helping people, not in 6 months, but like next week.
Wow.
So this was our point. This was our whole point. And it's going very well. So this has been my life for the last 3 months almost. For the first 2 months, I worked almost full time on the charitable activity.
There's a moment for all of us when we realize that which we really are called to do. And I know that you've worked tirelessly on this idea, but it's driven from a place of intrinsic motivation. And really what we're talking about is humanity. I believe that if any of us were put in the position where there was a literal tidal wave of humanity that needed our help, that we would all rise to the challenge and do something to play a role in helping another human being out of what is just an unimaginable situation.
Yep.
And so I'm from our community to you, John.
Yep.
Thank you for your willingness to step up to the plate and do that. And it is largely your efforts and what we've been told by the people who are aside you there doing the hard and necessary work that motivated us to want to carry on now the fundraising campaign that I was a part of, that I'm wearing the t-shirt, that was responsible for raising $55,000 for Save the Children, which is another really important organization doing very similar work to that which you're doing there in Ukraine.
Yes.
And we were moved at Social Good Promotions. We were moved by the response of what we were able to do in raising that amount of money in 2 weeks' time.
That is so awesome. I heard the story. I think it's so fabulous. Thank you. What I wanted to say was, we gave this thing the name Corporate Aid. Oh, I keep missing my thing. Corporate Aid for Ukraine. Yeah. And, but it turns out that we've raised more money with small, medium enterprises than we did with corporates. We're getting lots of $500,000 donations. We've got some $10,000, $25,000 donations, but we have a lot more $500,000 donations or even $200. And those are adding up fast to really significant amount of money. And you know, I can tell you exactly how much it costs to save a person's life. So the story that moved me the most in the beginning is, you know, that I'm a part of the other organization, YPO,
Yes.
Young Presence Organization, and YPO Poland has done amazing things. It's, you know, it's 60, 70 entrepreneurs running businesses in all different fields. One of the fellows, Max, his name Maximilian, his company has one of the best grocery store chains in Poland, and he also happens to have the chains also in Ukraine. So he's got supply chain of food, supply chain of materials, trucks running through Ukraine. So when he gets money, $50,000, he can send an entire truckload of food and supplies deep into Ukraine to any city, even if it's in war zone. They break it up into small trucks. The fellows drive at night and they deliver it to people in their basements. It's amazing. The second one, for me, even more amazing. A friend of mine, Marcin, works in the pharmaceutical industry for 20 years. He's CEO of a pharmaceutical medical devices company. His company happened to do business with cardiologists. So they were training cardiologists and whatnot. Well, on the second day of the war, the main medical device warehouse of Kyiv was bombed by the Russians and completely destroyed. Destroyed all of the pacemakers that were in stock to be installed during the month of March to save those people's lives. So 250 people were scheduled to get their pacemaker, their life-saving pacemaker, in March, and they were all blown up. And so Marcin came along. He went to the manufacturers. He negotiated very special prices, and we raised money, sent it to Marcin, and we've sent 100 pacemakers in already in small transport vehicles. They drive straight through the night under the enemy lines to deliver it, and we've had 100 pacemakers installed that were destroyed. For about $5,000, we could save a person's life.
Wow.
It's incredible. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, we're going to run our fundraising campaign for the entire month of June. So
Fantastic.
the notion of the idea of something like, hey, if we were able to raise $50,000, what we're essentially saying is we can feed a bunch of people.
Hundreds of people will get food. This is like as hands-on practical. Every penny donated is going to go. It's going to help somebody, help a family, save a person's life. I thought I would mention. I just watched actually YPO produced promotional video on the Ukraine war, what's happening and the humanity, all the things that people are doing to help. And one of the guys, he had a quote, and he said, Martin Luther King said that when we are suffering from real crisis and real hardship, like right now what's happening in Ukraine, when you suffer such hardship, you don't remember the bad things that the bad guys did. You remember the silence of your friends. And I thought, wow, that was very powerful. He said, so don't be silent. Stand up, help out. Yeah. I never did that much charitable stuff before. Anybody watching who gives it a second thought, you can go onto our website or onto yours, whatever, and pay in any way, check, credit card, whatever, and that's how we help. I understand that you guys are doing the collecting, and then we'll be the beneficiary and make sure the money gets into safe hands.
Yeah, and for us, you know, the campaign slogan is "We're all involved."
Yeah.
And why we chose that for the campaign slogan is intentional. Yes, this crisis is happening a world away, but yet there's no way that any of us can look at what's happening and say it hasn't had an effect on us in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely.
And if you're touched by what's happening, then for most of us, our natural reaction as Americans is to be moved to action. That's who we are as people. So what I feel like in what we're doing, right? I widened out here so people could see Goodness Warrior. You know, if you really believe that standing up for doing the right thing is important, this is your opportunity to do it. And what we've learned in our fundraising efforts here over the course of the last 6 months, to the tune of which we've raised almost $100,000 for causes that we care about, is that the power of the t-shirt has never been greater than it is today. It is an excellent communication medium. It is a way for you to express your participation in something like a movement. And it's a way to spark a conversation with others about the choice that you've made in a way that perhaps might inspire that person to do the same. So if we've done anything by virtue of this conversation that makes you feel like you want to be involved, we're giving you the opportunity to do that, not just for yourself, but for your organization, for your civic group, for a club that you're involved in. Why not get the group involved? Get some t-shirts on your bodies and work to tell the story about why what's happening in Ukraine is important to all of us. And I don't know if you can tell from the passion in my voice, John, that this matters to me. It matters. It really is important that we rally and do something for humanity. I'm grateful to you for the opportunity for us to be able to do that. And I thank you so much for coming on and talking to my audience about what's going on. And let's just see what we can do. I'm excited for the opportunity.
Very good. Very good. So good luck. Thank you very much for your support and for inviting me to join you here. And it's a pleasure, and look forward to working together even more.
Take care, John.
All right. Very good.